In this lesson, we're going to discuss how to get input from the user using a function called raw input. So we're going to use the interactive shell first, so let's open that. The way we use raw input is like so. We would, for example, create a variable and then assign it to the output of the raw input function. So that if I type some data into raw input and then hit the enter key, the interactive shell returns. And if I print the value of name, you'll see that it displays Mary Smith. So clearly, raw input pauses the interactive program to wait for the user to enter input. Once the user hits the enter key, then the input is sent from the function to the variable on the other side of the assignment statement. So string data is very simple to enter with raw input. You can enter one word or a whole sentence, for example. And again, it just keeps collecting input until I hit the enter key. Then it returns. And then whatever I've typed into the keyboard up into the enter key stroke is stored in sentence. We can also store numbers using raw input. But watch what happens when I type number times 2. It replicates the value stored in number rather than returning 200. That's because the output from raw input is string type. So if I want the data that raw input receives to be converted to a numeric type, I have to provide a function to do that. In this line, I have used the int conversion function to convert raw input's value to int from string. Now if I type print number times 2, it prints the correct value, or what I expected to be the correct value, which is 200, rather than 100, 100. If I'm working with floating point values, I can use float as the conversion function instead, and it will retrieve the data and store it as a floating point number, so that I can then do floating point operations on it without worrying about losing any data. So those are the primary uses of raw input. Certainly in this course, we'll mostly be retrieving strings and numbers from the user using raw input. Let's look at one more example that's a script rather than just using the interactive shell. So we're going to start a script. So what we're going to do is we're going to prompt the user to enter some values, and then we'll convert them to integer before we store them in the variable. So we'll do that a second time. And we're going to display the sum. Now right here I have a problem in that I can't concatenate a number, which is what we'll get when we add number 1 with number 2, to a string. We've seen in previous lessons that that leads to an error. So what I have to do is I have to use the string conversion function to convert number 1 plus number 2 to string format, and then I can store the result. So let's exit and save. Then we'll just run the script. 3 and 4 gives us 7. So that's how you use raw input to retrieve data from the user after they've typed it in at the keyboard. And now we're ready to move on to the exercise for this chapter, where we're going to use print and raw input to create an interactive thank you note.